think when we're thinking about growth models, we're thinking about change. We're recognizing that the past patterns of growth, which whilst they had delivered in many parts of Asia rising living standards, can't go on indefinitely as they are. The reason is that they are polluting the local environment, has been recognized very clearly, for example, in China's 12th five-year plan, but they're also polluting the global commons, in particular through the emissions of greenhouse gases, and they're putting enormous pressure on the world's natural resources. If you put those three problems together, then it's crystal clear that it can't go on as it was before. So the challenge is thinking about how do those growth models alter. It's not, do we give up growth? No, we don't. But we have to do it in a way that puts less pressure on the local environment, the global environment, and natural resources. Otherwise, it will simply be impossible for Asia as a whole to move into middle and then to upper income levels over the next 20 or 30 years. We've had perspectives on the way in which the global growth story can work and Asia's role in it. I think we've recognized that it has to be driven in large measure by the private sector, and that the role of government is in large measure creating an investment climate where people can invest for the long term. We've seen the different challenges in India and China. They have very different circumstances, and India is going to urbanize much more rapidly than China simply because it's behind in urbanization, and that'll have a big influence. We've seen that India's demography is very different from China, where India's workforce as a fraction of the total population will be going up right to the middle of the century. Of course, China's will not. So we've seen how the particular features of society matter a great deal in the investment and growth process. Those are just two examples, but they remind us you have to look explicitly at the problems and challenges of a particular country, and we have to be cautious about generalizing. I think the research plans of the Institute in terms of the subjects that have been identified, supply chains, the growth story, particularly comparing India and China, finance and sustainability, are the right ones in terms of describing the issues as we find them. We saw good discussion about the way the world is integrating, which will be critically dependent on and will influence in turn the supply chains. We've seen the instability of the world's financial systems, the inadequacy in many ways of the world's financial systems, particularly in the context of financing the big investment that's going to be necessary to drive up the living standards in Asia. So they're the right subjects, and just in those couple of examples we've seen how they feed off each other. So the FGI will be examining each of these topics in close detail, but it's also going to be examining how they fit together. And I think it is looking at the growth story in a much more explicit bottom-up as well as top-down way than we've seen in other studies of growth and change in the past.